For the last few weeks, the topic of video game prices has been a hot button issue, or at least prices in America. I know Canadians are used to this utter nonsense already, and they're probably rejoicing that they have company in their misery, and I don't blame them. First, the discussion popped up a few times when people began to speculate that the long-awaited Grand Theft Auto 6 might be launching with a massive $100 price tag for consumers to overcome if they wanted to play the game. This led to many people saying that no game is worth that price, which I do agree with, but with one specific nuance which I'll get into later. And more recently, we have the issue surrounding the cost of specific games for the upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 console. Nintendo held an hour-long direct showcasing the machine's capabilities, but suspiciously left out things like the launch price and almost any other detail that could be considered bad news. It wasn't until after that direct was over that news began to hit about pricing. There were a couple standouts, for bad reasons, but one of the biggest was Mario Kart World, which is slammed with a price tag of $80 US, adding an extra $10 to the already pretty high $70 standard we've had to deal with for the last few years now. There's a few things to unpack in this whole discussion, but to make it easier, we'll just go in order in which these conversations popped up. First is Grand Theft Auto 6. There's a lot to dislike about the idea of GTA 6 launching at $100. Aside from it being a very high price on the average person-to-person basis, it could also be the spear tip that leads the rest of the AAA gaming sector to slowly kick up prices to $100 a pop too. Of course, that would be a stupid thing to do for most publishers because literally no other franchise on the planet has the amount of popularity that Grand Theft Auto does. Every time a new GTA is released, it's basically an earth-moving event that raises the tides and shifts the mountains. If you're a publisher not named Rockstar Games, then you do not have a game that popular. So if you stupidly decide to charge $100 for your game because you think you can, you are fooling yourself. You do not have a Grand Theft Auto. Now, of course, despite how obvious that is, I would still expect some publishers to make the attempt anyway if GTA 6 leads the way. Beyond the potential price itself is the unfortunately high number of people who say that Grand Theft Auto is the only franchise that deserves to charge that much. This is, of course, very subjective and honestly a pretty pathetic stance to take, but you gotta keep in mind the type of person who says things like this. According to numerous sources I could find, ranging from random surveys on social media to Steam statistics provided by Valve themselves, the median gamer only buys 4 games per year. And chances are that 2 of those games are probably annual titles, like sports games and Call of Duty. For this specific group, Grand Theft Auto is by far the most interesting thing they play. This is why GTA 6 could reasonably get away with costing $100 per copy. Now let's head over to the next subject, Mario Kart World. It was quite a shock when the Switch 2 Direct finished and we were all slammed with that $80 USD price tag in follow-up news. I know some people speculate that the extra $10 probably comes from costumes, of which there are many. Now, other games charge a premium for costumes, so some people guess that Nintendo simply put that premium with the base price. And I can kinda understand that as someone who plays fighting games, a genre where a new costume for a single character can cost anywhere from $1 to $5. Beyond that, the brand value talking point I used for GTA also applies to Mario Kart. It's a long-running franchise and probably the #1 series in the entire kart racing subgenre. No other company could get away with pricing their own kart racer at $80 unless they were willing to match the amount of content at least. Nintendo knew what they were doing by not discussing price in the actual direct. If you've owned a Switch or you're just familiar with gaming on Nintendo platforms at all in the last 10 years or so, then you know that prices for Nintendo games are a huge issue because they never fucking go down. It doesn't matter if it's in a physical store or a digital shop. Nintendo games almost never see any sort of meaningful, permanent price drop. They're a notoriously stingy company. Mario Kart World being $80 might seem like a surprise, but the writing has been on the wall ever since Nintendo charged $70 for Tears of the Kingdom, even though it was still on the same platform as its predecessor. Tears of the Kingdom didn't need to cost $70. It's a mainline Zelda game. It was already guaranteed to do insane numbers. But since Sony, Microsoft, and multiple big publishers have been softening the blow already with multiple years of their own $70 releases, Nintendo, of course, got away with it. Arguably the bigger cause for concern, though, than the price of Mario Kart is the reasoning behind it. Gene Park of the Washington Post interviewed Doug Bowser, yes, that is his real name, president of Nintendo of America. Bowser explains that Nintendo is taking a special approach to pricing their titles, namely variable pricing. What this means is that they examine every title on a case-by-case basis and determine the most appropriate price for them based on the breadth and depth of the gameplay and their replayability. And it should come as no surprise, but Mario Kart World was also likely chosen to be the $80 title because the last game sold over 67 million copies, just the Switch version. At first, the whole variable pricing thing might sound reasonable, but I suspect it probably won't take long for it to look extremely arbitrary. For example, Donkey Kong Bonanza is already confirmed to be $70, which may make sense because it probably won't have strong multiplayer capabilities like Mario Kart, nor the potential for long-term content updates. But if a new 3D Mario game comes out, or the next big Zelda game comes out, and those are $80 too, also without strong multiplayer or long-term content updates, then the variable pricing idea is going to look suspect. And another problem with variable pricing is adding replayability to the game's price. Now yes, some games are made with replayability in mind, but at the end of the day, the act of replaying a game is something that varies from player to player. It doesn't matter if a game is made with replay value as a priority if the player doesn't actually replay it. And if you look at achievement and trophy statistics, you'll notice that most people do not replay most games they purchase. In fact, a lot of people don't even finish their first playthrough. Replayability is a good thing to strive for in a game, but it is a very subjective part of the gameplay experience that only matters on a case-by-case basis. If every game added its potential for replayability to its price, then Balatro would rightfully cost $1,000. Binding of Isaac would rightfully cost $1,000. Tetris would rightfully cost $1,000. And none of those are big, expensive AAA games, most of which would be no more than $30, if that. Again, replay value is good, and I do typically prefer games that aim for high replay value in one way or another, but it is a type of value that only the player can truly decide for themselves. Now, it probably goes without saying, but when something involving money happens in the game industry, there are people who try to explain it away, as if doing so will magically undo the price increase. And look, I get it. I understand that video game prices have stayed around $60 USD for decades and never budged with inflation. But at the same time, a reason why it never budged was because it never really needed to. Even the most ambitious games throughout the 90s, 2000s, and also a bit into the 2010s were able to break even with just 2, 3, maybe 4 million sales at $60 each. Even Grand Theft Auto 5 had a budget reasonable enough that it would turn a profit at only 5 million sales, though everyone and their mother knew it would blow right past that. It's not a coincidence that the bigger publishers are pushing for pricier games in an era where budgets are more commonly hitting $200, $300, maybe $400 million or more, especially if we include marketing. And many of these games have nothing to show for such massive expectations. It's an ugly side effect of years of studios pushing technological boundaries for the sake of it. A good example is the Callisto Protocol, a game that came and went like an afternoon drizzle. It's a very linear game with shallow exploration and repetitive combat that hardly evolves at all as you play it, but it's also one of the nicest looking games you could currently buy. The result is an alleged budget of $162 million. If you played that game just as I did, and I reviewed it too, then you know damn well that beyond graphics, this game doesn't have enough sauce anywhere to justify such a crazy number. A company's unsustainable expenditures is not my problem to solve. No one actually strong-armed any of these publishers to spend the equivalent of the GDP of a tiny nation to make one video game. They decided that themselves. Now, Nintendo, on the other hand, is pretty much the opposite. They are just being greedy. There is no way in hell any of their games have a budget big enough to warrant an $80 price tag on top of the near guarantee that almost every first-party title of theirs is gonna hit 10 million sales. Nintendo is being straight up avaricious for the sake of it here. In fact, the interactive manual for the Switch 2, the Welcome Tour, is going to cost money. It is not a free pack-in game like it obviously should be. Even Sony knew to include Astro's Playroom with the PS5, and this is Nintendo's response. This was also a very unpleasant surprise on top of Mario Kart World's price. But this dumb decision makes sense when you learn that Wii Sports, one of the most popular pack-in games of all time with the Wii, was also very close to being a separate priced game until Reggie Fils-Aimé begged Shigeru Miyamoto to bundle it with the console. Miyamoto initially hated the idea because he firmly believed that every game Nintendo made with sincere effort should never be free. But Reggie was a good enough businessman to understand when that mindset should be thrown into the garbage for the sake of creating goodwill with the consumers. And if there is one thing that I know, it's that Nintendo truly believes they do not need to create goodwill anymore. And unfortunately, they are probably right. If you want to see what I mean, you can check out the video I made covering Nintendo's past legal conflicts. Now, I've seen a few people say that they would rather spend $80 on a game they know they're going to replay a ton than $60 or $70 on a game they won't. And while I agree with the intent behind that statement, this is not a real dichotomy. A better option than both of those is a $60 or under game you replay a ton. I know there's a lot of mediocrity out there, but not that much. It's really not that difficult to gain better judgment and be a better spender. At the beginning of the video, I said I agree with the sentiment that no game is worth $100, but I had a detail I wanted to add to that, so let's get into it. This is going to be somewhat related to an older video I made called The Quality of an Hour in a Video Game. So if you want to hear me speak more on this subject, check out that video. A link will be in the description. Basically, what I wanted to add to the no game is worth $100 statement is a small asterisk. No game is worth $100 except in hindsight. What do I mean by this? Think of it like this. I am a Final Fantasy XIV player, a subscription-based MMO. I've been playing it on and off for about 6 years now. I've experienced numerous high and low points, though not as many as people who have been playing since day one. I've put over 1,100 hours into that game, and if you tally up all the money I've spent on it, the base game, the expansions, and the months I was subscribed, then it all adds up to probably around $300. $300 for one game. Well, one game with 5 expansions that add about a full game's worth of content each, but technically still one game. $300. Was it worth it? Hell yeah, it was fucking worth it. Some of the most memorable moments of my entire gaming life happened in there. If I disliked it, I wouldn't have played long enough to put that much money into it. Shadowbringers alone is one of the best things with the Final Fantasy name attached to it. It's only an expansion, sure, but it is so good it stands shoulder to shoulder with the best mainline Final Fantasy entries. But here's the thing though, I spent all that money slowly over 6 years of constant playing. I have the benefit of hindsight to judge if that expense was worth it. If I were to go back in time and I had to spend $300 just to start the game, of course I wouldn't fucking do it. Because how on earth would I possibly guess that I would deem $300 a fair price after putting over 1,000 hours into it? I can't predict something like that. That's what I mean, and what I think a decent amount of other people mean when they say a game is not worth $100. No game is worth $100 just to get over the barrier of entry. We can only judge a game to be worth that much or not after we have reached enough quality playtime with it, and a lot of games don't hit that value for a lot of people. Now, the final question here is, what if the prices do continue to go up? What if Nintendo successfully normalizes the $80 tag, and in another 6 or 7 years, more companies normalize $90 or $100? If that happens, what am I going to do? Well, the answer is simple. I continue to do what I have slowly been doing for the last several years. Shift my focus away from AAA games and focus more on AA and indie titles. There is no shortage of those. In fact, I have made multiple videos about small, affordable games, old and new, that are worth getting. They exist, and they will continue to come out. Do you know what games I've been playing for the last few weeks or so? Stuff like Void's Vigil, Soulstone Survivors, Schedule 1, Thronefall. Some of my most favorite games that I've released in the last few years are extremely fun indies that are rarely more than $15. Some of them are $5. Hell, some of them are free. If you're dreading the rise of video game prices but you don't want to quit gaming over it, then you don't have to. Join me in the AA and indie shelter. There is plenty of space. This concludes my thoughts on the direction of video game prices. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.